Hello, and thanks for joining us today for what we hope will be an informative and enlightening discussion entitled Project-Based Learning, or PBL, as a Vehicle for High-Impact Practices, Reinventing Courses. We're pleased to have three higher ed experts with us as presenters today. We have Kristen Wobe, co-director of the Center for Project-Based Learning at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, or WPI, along with Betsy Barry, executive director of the Center for Advancement of Teaching at Wake Forest University, and Michael Reese, Director of Program Development at the RISE Learning Institute at Bellevue College in Washington. Let me tell you a little bit about our presenters. Kristen Wobe is co-director of WPI's Center for Project-Based Learning and director of the Great Problem Seminar, the Institute's projects program for first-year students. Her prior positions include Associate Dean for Undergraduate Studies and Head of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. Her teaching awards include the Maruzzi Prize for Innovation in Undergraduate Education. She is also a co-recipient of the 2016 Bernard M. Gordon Prize for Innovation in Engineering and Technology Education, awarded by the National Academy of Engineering. She received her BA in Chemistry from St. Olaf College and her PhD in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology from Harvard University. She is co-editor of Project-Based Learning in the first year. Other recent publications appear in Change, the Magazine of Higher Learning and Diversity and Democracy. Betsy Barry is Executive Director for the Center for the Advancement of Teaching at Wake Forest University. Betsy leads a team of 5 to advance the passionate, reflective, and evidence-informed teaching that is characteristic of the university's teacher-scholar ideal. The center contributes to Wake Forest's distinctive mission by supporting the development of meaningful teacher-student relationships that prepare all students to live examined and purposeful lives. She began her career teaching philosophy and religious studies at Lake Forest College, Marymount, Manhattan College, and Rice University. When Rice launched its Center for Teaching Excellence in 2013, she was appointed a founding assistant director. In 2016, she was promoted to associate director, and she began her current position at Wake Forest in May of 2018. In these positions, she has overseen numerous educational development initiatives, all with an eye toward developing and sustaining campus cultures that support and reward exceptional teaching. She has also contributed to national conversations on teaching and learning, regularly consults with outside institutions, and was awarded the Professional and Organizational Development Network in Higher Education's Innovation Award in 2017. Michael Reese is a Director of Program Development for the RISE Learning Institute at Bellevue College, the largest community college in the state of Washington. The Institute brings multiple high-impact practices under a single roof. It seeks to ensure that transformative learning is at the heart of what Bellevue does. He established the college's makerspace and coordinates efforts to expand undergrad research, service learning, and project-based learning. In addition, he is currently interim director of the college's Center for Career Connections, which he previously served as the head of the academic internship program. Prior to his arrival at Bellevue in 2010, he was an instructor and capstone coordinator at the University of Washington's program on the environment. A graduate of Reed College, he did his graduate work in environmental history at UW. And I'm Michael Ampt. I'm a writer with the Chronicle of Higher Education, and I'll be the moderator for this webinar. As we begin, a few things we need to keep in mind. At any time during this live presentation, you may ask a question by typing into the box on your console. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible toward the end of the webinar. Feel free to download a copy of the event slides by clicking the Resources tab in the upper right-hand corner. The event's being recorded, and an archived version will be available to you starting in about 48 hours. And now let's talk with one of our first experts, Chris Wobe at WPI. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Mike.
I want to start us off with some definition of terms. For audience members who could use a refresher, can you tell us a little bit about high-impact practices and project-based learning?
Sure. Over a decade ago, George Koo identified a set of activities that demonstrably increased student engagement and retention in higher ed, and he called them high-impact practices. They included things like first-year seminar, writing-intensive courses, internships, and research. Project-based learning, interestingly, was not included in the original list. However, more and more often, project-based learning is being spoken of as a high-impact practice.
What is
because
project-based learning, and why is it seen as having high impact? What's the key? What makes it high impact?
Well, like the best high-impact practices, project-based learning engages students in their own learning. It asks students to address complex, open-ended problems with a real-world context. The students then become involved in creating their own path to answers, and doing this, like the others, requires critical thinking, research, usually communicating in a variety of ways, including presentations, reports, visuals, and students frequently end up working in teams. So projects can be a vehicle for a writing-intensive class, where maybe the writing assignments all revolve around the project that the students are doing. Or projects can be frequently found in first-year seminars. Service learning, another one of the high-impact practices, is best done around a project. So in the end, adopting PBL can have a transformative effect on courses, changing the whole dynamic.
But just a quick aside here, why is it important for first-year seminars to have some kind of high-impact practice, do you think?
Well, that's a really critical time for students who are entering college. Having them do something that affirms their own competence and capabilities can be really affirming of their choice to be in college and engage them in the rest of their college work.
Great. So the subtitle for this webinar is Reinventing Courses, quote unquote. Tell us a little about how colleges can make that transformation happen.
Well, much of traditional coursework in higher ed involves faculty member as a transmitter of information and the student as a passive consumer of that knowledge. Project work really flips that on its head. Now, students are sent out into the world to find or create information and knowledge, convey it to each other and to the faculty member. So they end up synthesizing and creating in a way that frequently they don't have to do in a traditional lecture-based course.
Okay, this seems like a good time to talk about WPI's long history with project-based learning. You've been doing this for a long time, right?
We have. In fact, this year is our 50th anniversary of the very important faculty vote to adopt a project-based curriculum. So at the time, they voted in two major projects that were then and still are graduation requirements. Over time, we've added many more opportunities for students to participate in project work, both inside and outside of courses, and across the whole 4 years of our curriculum.
So you obviously practice what you preach. Do you have any evidence to kind of back up the fact that project-based learning is effective?
We do. For many years, we were rested on the laurels of seeing that transformation in our students, but decided we needed something a little more rigorous, and so we got a consultant to come and evaluate the long-term impacts of our project-based learning by surveying alumni. And out of that work, we saw that the alumni attributed significant impacts of projects on both their professional and personal development. The largest effects were in areas of self-efficacy. They developed more confidence in their ability to develop ideas, to make a difference, to take charge of their own learning. Now, surveys, again, are all self-reported gains, and to get a little more objective view, we also surveyed employers. That was, of course, a much smaller sample, but the employers uniformly felt that WPI produced employees who were well-equipped to be productive from the date of hire, and to the extent that they knew about our project-based curriculum, were willing to attribute that effectiveness to the projects program. So we have those long-term benefits. We had developed evidence of those, but we also see more immediate benefits to adopting project-based learning.
What kind of immediate benefits are we talking about?
Well, it's a really effective way to help students integrate and apply knowledge. So I, for many years, taught a biochemistry course where I had students adopt a PET enzyme at the beginning of the course. Then while we were learning the theoretical aspects of protein structure and function in class, the students had to research those same things about their own PET enzyme. So the project, which was originally designed as a mechanism to require students to use available biochemical tools, had the unintended but wonderful consequence of helping the students integrate the information and really see how the course topics built on one another.
In that biochemistry example, I can easily see how PBL could really help students learn content-specific material, but I know that a lot of Worcester students do projects that aren't discipline-specific. What do they get from doing projects like that?
Well, project-based learning is an incredibly effective way to help students understand connections between different fields of knowledge, something that's really hard to do in our discipline-specific courses. Because real-world problems don't respect disciplinary boundaries. For example, if you ask students to grapple with an authentic problem, such as how to improve water quality in a nearby pond, they might need to draw on knowledge in science, math, public policy, psychology, and absolutely in communication. And given that the problem is so obviously real to them, water quality in their own community, they become really highly motivated to develop a useful solution.
Okay, well, that's all great for students, but does project-based learning benefit any other constituencies on or around campus?
Well, absolutely. I think, in fact, all stakeholders benefit. There are benefits to faculty, the institution, and to communities. Faculty tend to really enjoy the greater engagement they have with students, the increased opportunity for their own creativity and coming up with project ideas, and the fun of learning from the student projects themselves. Institutions can benefit because student projects provide amazing evidence that's useful in accreditation and great marketing materials. There's nothing that helps admissions other than having lots of great pictures of students doing active work. And longer-term benefits because students report being more connected to an institution because of their project work and so can become more engaged alumni. And finally, communities can benefit if the students are doing work in their communities or communities anywhere. So again, all of the stakeholders can really benefit from the adoption of project-based learning.
And does that mean that project-based learning is for every kind of institution, everyone?
Well, I wouldn't advocate that all classes should immediately adopt project-based learning. It's a better match for some courses and disciplines than others. It might not be a perfect fit for a large enrollment introductory course intended to just convey some basic knowledge, but it's especially effective in courses where you want students to use that knowledge.
But there are some barriers people should be aware of to adopting this.
Of course. Yeah, and a lot of those have to do with the changing roles of faculty and students and can raise concerns for both constituents there.
Okay, let's start with the faculty regarding that.
Well, as I alluded to, project-based learning requires a little bit of a different role for faculty. Rather than being a content expert, they end up having to operate more like a coach. And that can be really uncomfortable to begin with. And faculty also worry about how to cover all the content and still include a project.
So how do you respond as someone who teaches this to other educators, to those kinds of concerns that faculty have?
Well, first you have to acknowledge that those concerns are real, but we found that faculty can really be persuaded by the evidence that project-based learning benefits their students, and maybe a discussion about what content coverage really means.
So what is it? What is content coverage?
Well, in traditional lecture format, you can march through the first 7 chapters of the book. And there's some worry that by reducing that, you'll reduce the rigor of a course. But coverage of material through lectures is no guarantee of retention of that material. Studies suggest that students retain knowledge when they become active participants in their learning, which is the case in PBL. In that biochemistry class I taught, I did have to remove a little bit of content in order to include the project and give the students the time they needed to complete it. But I was able to remove content that provided no new principles or frameworks for thought. It was just additional examples of enzymatic pathways. And so for me, the benefits of having the students understand at a deeper level the principles, the connections between concepts and habits of thought of biochemists versus memorizing a couple of additional pathways, that was an easy trade. If my students are anything like me, they're going to forget the details of those pathways pretty quickly anyway.
So do faculty have to edit some material in order to adopt project-based learning projects?
No, I've seen other faculty who incorporated projects where the students were assigned as their project to learn and teach each other some of the material in the course. And that can be a pretty effective method. The other advantage to project-based learning is it frequently hits multiple learning objectives simultaneously. So while students are learning content, they're also gaining in critical thinking skills, presenting, information literacy, teamwork, a whole host of really valuable skills.
Let's talk about what the barriers are for students. What do you see out there? Are there some students who have a hard time with this, or?
Sure. As the faculty have to change their roles, students have to change their roles. Most students come to us with at least 12 years of experience with teachers telling them exactly what to learn and how to respond on tests. They've been pretty successful with the old way, and the stakes are high for students. They need the credits and the grades, and so they're anxious. They need faculty to provide supports as they adjust to this new way of learning.
Anything else that educators need to watch out for in terms of what the student barriers might be?
Well, some of the best project-based learning involves teamwork, where the students are working with each other, and working in teams has pitfalls as well as many benefits. The benefits are that students in teams learn a lot from each other. They can accomplish more than individuals, and so they can tackle larger, more complex problems. Learning how to work in a team is a valuable skill for any workplace. But the benefits don't happen automatically. Faculty need to be thoughtful about giving students some structure and guidance for coming together as a team, establishing norms and agreements, and communicating well. Individual accountability has to be balanced with a desire for the team to succeed. In our work at the center, we probably spend more time helping faculty think about teamwork than any other aspect of project-based learning.
So it seems like a good time for you to talk about the Center for Project-Based Learning at Worcester Polytech. How you've gotten it moving, how old it is, what it does, that kind of thing.
Sure. 4 years ago, we created the center to help other institutions adopt, strengthen, or expand their own efforts in project-based learning. We currently offer an annual institute where we invite institutions to send teams of 5 or more to come to WPI for 2.5 days to work on a plan for advancing project-based learning on their own campus. Each team is assigned a coach and can take advantage of a series of workshops, consultations, and lots of time to work as a team on their PBL adoption plan. Each year we've had about 18 to 28 teams from a variety of institutions come to the institute. But in addition to that, we also offer consultations and custom workshops on campuses. And we've had more than a few times an institution come for our annual institute, and then after a year or so, invite us to come and work with a larger group of faculty on their campus.
So WPI has worked with a lot of different institutions. Why do you think so many types of institutions are able to incorporate this type of pedagogy?
Well, PBL is infinitely flexible. It's one of the beautiful and beneficial features of it. Projects can be designed to address the learning objectives of a wide variety of courses. They can be designed to be appropriate to novices through to advanced learners. They can be adapted to fit an institution's culture and mission. And given that flexibility, there's no reason that any type of institution couldn't find multiple places to incorporate projects.
Just an aside again, does that make it daunting for some universities to take on the fact that there are so many customizations, so much tailoring you can do, instead of having a very set way to do it?
Well, maybe, but I think that's also a real advantage. If it were plug and play, many people would look at it and say, well, but that doesn't really fit our needs. And to be able to have it be adaptable, and frequently the faculty have their own ideas. Once you show them how somebody has done it one way, they can take bits of it and turn it into something beautiful of their own that works on their campus with their students.
Well, that's great. So that flexibility really is key. I mean, that's one of the things people should know about project-based learning, is that it can really be tailored to what they need it to be.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. We have 2 additional panelists who are going to share their story of their schools and how they adopted project-based learning in their courses. We're going to start with Betsy Barry from Wake Forest University. Hi, Betsy. How are you?
Hi, doing well.
Great. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Wake Forest University, just the basics to start with?
Sure, happy to do so. And I also just want to begin by thanking the Chronicle for inviting Wake Forest to participate in this webinar. We're excited about the project-based work our faculty are doing and happy to share about our experiences.
Great.
So
Thanks
for those who
thanks
don't
for
know,
being here.
yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, Wake Forest is a private selective institution in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, so we're Southern. And we're a mid-sized institution with around 5,200 undergraduates and around 3,200 graduate students. However, it's worth noting, getting a little bit more specific about that 70% of our graduate students are in one of 4 professional schools. So we have a med school, a business school, a law school, and a divinity school. And over 90% of the non-professional graduate students are actually MA students. And so that's a way of saying we really only confer around 30 PhDs a year. What that means is that we are a research university, but a unique kind of research university. We like to call ourselves a collegiate university to emphasize that the liberal education we provide students in our undergraduate college is really at the core of what we do, but that we try to do this alongside and in concert with graduate and professional education. So one way we do that is by emphasizing what we call the engaged liberal arts. And that's our attempt to help our students come to see the connections between the liberal arts the liberal arts education they're getting in the classroom and the work they'll be doing later in life, whether that's in their communities or in their professions. And we're also a place that cares a great deal about teaching and relationships between faculty and students. So we value high-touch relational teaching. We prioritize a teacher-scholar ideal where faculty are seen as both teachers and scholars, and we work hard to sustain that culture, where faculty are working closely with students as mentors and guides outside the classroom. And related to this is, I think, a unique commitment among research universities to educating the whole student. And more specifically, we think a lot at Wake Forest about how to prepare students to live lives that matter. So we have specific offices that support civic and community engagement, personal and career development, and also a new office to support the development of leadership and character. So all of that background, I think, is relevant for thinking about what we're doing with respect to project-based learning. And so you may not be surprised to know that, given this background, a lot of our faculty have been engaging in project-based learning, or at least engaging in pedagogies that are adjacent to or overlapping with project-based learning. In particular, we've long supported community and or campus-engaged projects. We have a long history of internship programs. We have a program in Washington right now, Wake Washington, and a variety of other programs that we are working with our students to get them out in the community. And because of our high-touch nature, we also have a long history of bringing faculty together with students to work on undergraduate research. And particularly, we're starting now to think more about how to bring that into the classroom and not just in the lab. And our faculty have also made great use of collections on campus. So these would be special collections in our library, our art collections. We have an anthropology museum that many of our faculty have incorporated in their classroom in creative ways. And many now are starting to do projects related to digital technology that live outside of the classroom and have real impact on the lives of beyond Wake Forest. But in 2016, as our undergraduate college began to embark on a multi-year review of our core curriculum, we began to think more intentionally about the place of project-based learning at Wake Forest. More specifically, our review began with a best practices curriculum task force charged with reviewing our curriculum revisions at other institutions. What are other institutions doing? And particularly, WPI was on that list. How could we think about creative ways to revise our curriculum? And part of that process, the dean and 5 additional members of this task force attended the WPI Institute in the summer of 2017. And they were so impressed by their experience that they sent another group of 5 faculty associated with our new Interdisciplinary Center for Entrepreneurship in the summer of 2018. And that happens to be the summer when I started at Wake Forest. So when I arrived on campus in my new role, one of my first meetings with the dean of the college, we talked a lot about her experience at WPI and thinking about project-based learning. And she suggested we think about bringing WPI to campus to reach a wider audience of Wake faculty. And I had experience with project-based learning at other institutions and knew well how much it was supported in the literature and how much it advanced student learning. So I was really excited to organize this event. So in February of 2019, we had a 2-day PBL event where Richard Vaz came out to campus. And this 2-day event involved a keynote on project-based learning with a faculty panel. And the faculty were those who engaged in something like project-based learning in their classes. And this talk also involved a series of group meetings with 4 administrative groups or offices and 5 different academic departments, which were especially helpful for our faculty to think about how to make project-based learning, to build it in a more substantial way into their courses. And happily, after this event, we're currently planning our first ever Project-Based Learning Institute this summer, where faculty can work to revise their courses or design new courses that incorporate small or large-scale projects. And we have a long-standing course development grant, and we'll be making this available to those faculty as well.
Right, and that's Richard Voss, the co-director of the Center for Project-Based Learning, who made that visit in the spring.
That's right. That's right.
Wake Forest has been doing things that kind of echo or, work around the edges of what could be construed as project-based learning, and you've had experience at other institutions dealing with it too. So you're not new to this. This is something you've been around for a while, and Wake Forest has kind of been, without even realizing it, from what I understand, in this teaching in this way for a while as well. So it's an interesting kind of marriage between you and the center. What have been the benefits of initiating project-based learning conversations at Wake Forest on the campus? What's come from those conversations?
Sure, that's a great question. So there are a number of direct benefits of getting our faculty to engage in project-based learning, and a lot of what Chris has already shared. But so we know it improves student engagement and learning. We know it helps them prepare for their lives beyond our institutions. And for our particular purposes, our mission at Wake Forest, we're really committed to thinking about our relationships with the community. And so project-based learning can have some direct impacts on our relationship with the community as well. But for us, it was really interesting. I think what the biggest benefit for us was more structural, in that project-based learning gave us a common language to link up various kinds of pedagogy that work in somewhat similar ways across campus. So when I was tasked with putting together a panel of those who had done projects in their courses for the visit from WPI, I was new at Wake Forest, so I didn't know a lot about what the faculty were doing yet. And so I called various offices who were supporting faculty in project adjacent work. So I talked with our Office of Community and Civic Engagement. I talked with folks in Office of Sustainability. I talked with folks that were doing work and study abroad, various offices that were supporting their faculty. And what was really shocking and surprising, but also exciting to me, was that we discovered over 130 faculty were doing some sort of projects in their classroom. Some of these were really small, some were quite big, but they maybe wouldn't have identified their work as project-based learning. So what was great about this initiative was, and I hope it will continue to do, is a great way of bringing together support offices who were often siloed, so we often weren't talking to each other. But I think most importantly, it was a great way to bring faculty together who normally don't work together to help one another think about developing their teaching practices.
And are they happy to do that? I mean, are they finding themselves relieved to actually know people who are on the other side of the wall or other side of the campus?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to give you an example, a lot of our STEM faculty are very much engaged in undergraduate research. It's part of the culture of a lot of STEM disciplines. They sort of understand, we can get a student in our lab and then they can work on a project. And so they're interested in undergraduate research. A lot of the folks on the humanities side are doing community engaged work, and often they don't see those two things as similar. And this was a great way to say a lot of the pedagogical principles that underlie undergraduate research and a lot of the pedagogical principles that underlie the value of community engaged teaching are actually quite similar, and they can learn from one another in how they structure their projects and also how they assess those projects. And so it was really exciting to think about ways to build a bigger community instead of smaller silos.
You mentioned all those types of teaching, the community engagement, et cetera. Has it been a challenge to get faculty at Wake Forest to think about their teaching through the lens of project-based learning? And actually
it's a great question.
It that way?
Yeah. So when we reached out to faculty to ask them to be on the panel for this event on project-based learning, many of them with wonderfully exciting projects. One English faculty member had worked with her students to do research in special collections and actually publish a book on the material we had in special collections. So there were a variety of faculty doing really interesting things, but they were hesitant to participate in the panel because they didn't think that they were doing project-based learning. And so for us, it was, once we shared with them the framework for PBL, and that's one benefit of some of the literature on PBL and the work of WPI is they have a framework with here are the sort of common features of a project-based course, but you don't have to have all of them. A lot of our faculty realized, oh, I guess we are doing project-based learning. And I think it was exciting for them because they realized there was a wider community of people who could help them. So many of our faculty just intuitively came up with some cool projects to do in their classes that they knew would be valuable. But when they realized that there was actually a larger framework and theory behind this, they realized that would be really valuable to think about how it could help them structure and improve the work that they were already doing.
That's great. So setting aside the question of what we name this work, whether it's project-based learning or community engaged, et cetera, what challenges has Wake Forest faced in supporting this kind of teaching?
So I think, there are new challenges that are, I think, coming forward, which are related to bringing faculty together from different areas and thinking about bringing the different offices together. But I think looking back, as our various offices were supporting faculty and doing this work, I think one of the biggest challenges is logistics. So sometimes you can do project-based learning, and I think we'll hear about this from Michael a little bit later. There are ways of doing project-based learning that are not resource intensive. That's one of the beauties of project-based learning, is it can be quite flexible. But some kinds of project-based learning really do take a lot of resources and logistics. So thinking about building connections with the community partners to think about who you're going to engage with and thinking about how to scaffold those, thinking about the resources to support faculty in the one-on-one work and undergraduate research and a variety of other things. So it's certainly been the case that I think that if we can provide more logistical support to our faculty so that it doesn't take as much time to redesign a course, that's something that they have appreciated. But the other thing that we found to be a challenge, but that we're excited to tackle is that, and I'm sure this is true across the board, is that our faculty would like some help to think about how to integrate these projects into their courses in a way that is not just another fun project, that's actually really intellectually rigorous. So they're interested in thinking about how to make sure their projects are aligned with their course goals, and again, not just a cool thing to do. So they know it's a fun project, they know their students will like it, but they really want to think more intentionally about what their course goals are and how those projects actually advance those course goals. And then secondly, this is something that faculty, even in non-project-based courses, have struggled with, but their faculty are particularly anxious about thinking about how to assess the work that they do in a project-based course and how to do it fairly and in a way that is aligned with their course goals. So that's one way that our office has been thinking about working with faculty on projects, is to think about how to make this more structured for them so that they can feel confident that this course is assessing learning in the same way that their traditional courses are as well.
Is assessment an issue? I mean, are metrics still developing as far as project-based learning at Wake Forest goes?
Yeah, well, so there's larger program assessment that because we're still pretty early in thinking about project-based learning as an initiative, we have not done a lot of careful assessment of the program outcomes. But even in the course level, it's something that I think our faculty just want to make sure that when they're thinking about grading, for example, that they're grading fairly in a way that is aligned with their goals. And I will say this was one of the greatest benefits of having Rick come to campus, is that he's, of course, the folks at WPI have done these workshops numerous times and have heard these questions before. And so he was able to provide our faculty with rubrics to think about how you would assess team-based learning and how you would think about assessing the process, not as much as the product, because that's sometimes what worries our faculty as well. If it's an authentic project, they may actually fail. Do we fail the students? And the answer is no. You can grade them on process and what they're learning rather than necessarily the outcome. So having conversations about assessing the course was really valuable for our faculty.
Okay, great. Do you have any advice for those who want to motivate their faculty to learn about or integrate project-based learning into their classrooms?
Sure. So I think the first thing to say is to do a little bit of fact-finding first before you think about what needs to happen, because one of the things that was surprising, maybe not surprising, but it was important for me to learn when I arrived at Wake Forest, is that there were actually already a number of faculty engaged in this process and these types of projects. They just didn't know it. And so I think the first thing to do would figure out what's happening on campus. If there are programs that are related, connect with them and think about those offices and think about how you can work together to think about project-based learning. And then also be flexible about defining what counts, particularly if you want to make use of the faculty who are already doing this work as champions. you want to make sure that you're not too rigid about saying that does or doesn't count as project-based learning. If there are some elements, then bring them on board and think about expanding from there. Of course, we always recommend sharing the research with faculty about how it makes a difference, because this sometimes does take a little bit of extra work, but if they see that it's going to actually have major improve outcomes for students, our faculty at least are really excited to do that. And I think pragmatically, really important advice is to share with faculty. Sometimes our faculty are overly ambitious and they want to completely redesign their course. If they could, they would completely redesign our curriculum like WPI did. But I often share with them, start small. Think about a small project in a unit of a course rather than thinking of completely redesigning a course. And that often made them more excited. It felt more manageable that they could work on that. And then finally, make and share as many resources as possible.
Great. Betsy, that's fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that with us.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Now on to our next speaker, Michael Reese from Bellevue College. Hi, Michael.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, it's our pleasure. Tell us a little bit about Bellevue College, some of the basics about it.
Sure. Bellevue College is the largest community college in Washington State, and the third largest institution of higher learning out here in Washington. We had over 23,000 students take credit courses last year, and about 2/3 of those students are part-time. We're a comprehensive institution, so about half of our credit students are looking to transfer to a 4-year university when they're done here, and about 30% are in our professional technical programs that focus on workforce preparation. About 15% are in ESL or other pre-college courses, and getting close to 5% are in our own bachelor degrees programs. So we were one of the first community colleges in the U.S. to offer baccalaureate degrees, and we have 12 of them now.
Yeah, that's rare. It's very rare. Yeah, go ahead.
BC, we're also a very, very diverse institution. So we have a very high percentage of low-income and first-generation college students. We're about 55% students of color. We also have over 1,000 F1 international students and 2,600 dual credit students who are still in high school. BC is also known as something of as a leader in services to students with disabilities. So our occupational and life skills programs, one of the only programs in the nation that allows students with cognitive disabilities to earn an associate's degrees. And we get national recognition for our Autism Spectrum Navigators program, which recently rebranded itself as Neurodiversity Navigators.
That sounds like you're covering quite a bit of turf. What drew Bellevue College toward project-based learning?
Yeah, long story short, we saw the potential of project-based learning to be a powerful pedagogy in virtually all disciplines and at all levels from pre-college to senior capstone. I work for a unit that's called the RISE Learning Institute. Our name stands for Research, Innovation, Service, and Experiential Learning. RISE was created about 5 years ago to bring together multiple high-impact practices under a single roof. Back in 2017, RISE decided to explore project-based learning. We were already very active in supporting course-based undergraduate research. We also ran campus-wide internship program, a couple of cohort-based learning communities, and we were just rolling out new programming in academic service learning. We thought PBL could simultaneously support and extend our work in those areas. We were also looking for an approach that could facilitate some interdisciplinary collaborations and engage some departments that hadn't previously been very well connected to high-impact practices.
How are you helping faculty reinvent their courses? Can you give me some idea of the major initiatives you have related to project-based learning?
Sure. One of the first and one of the smartest things that we did was take a team of 16 faculty from all across campus to the Institute for Project-Based Learning at WPI. And we picked WPI's institute because it offered a way for our faculty to work individually on their course-specific goals and to work together on an action plan to advance PBL on our campus. That is not always an easy combination to find. And the creation of a campus action plan for us was not at all a hypothetical exercise. We knew we wanted to do more in this space, but we weren't clear on exactly how we wanted to do that. We got some clarity at the Institute. That first group to attend created a fantastic action plan that propelled us forward. And then we knocked out most of our near-term action items the following year. So we hired a faculty lead for project-based learning, Miranda Cotto, and she's done a tremendous job spearheading our faculty development work in this area. I really want to thank our Teaching and Learning Center, the BC Faculty Commons, because that faculty lead was a jointly funded position, and we could not have gotten the ball rolling without support from and collaboration with the Faculty Commons. That was absolutely key. Once we had a faculty lead, we were able to create a faculty learning community for project-based learning. This sort of cross-disciplinary community of practice was an important element of our action plan, and it's worked really well for us. More recently, we've added a series of smaller workshops related to PBL for folks who might not be able to participate in a 6-month community of practice. And we did our first on-campus PBL summit this summer in an effort to get some of the depth of a community of practice, but in a shorter period of time. We've also been working on resources to support faculty. This summer, we brought an interdisciplinary group together to create some assessment tools, including a common rubric for teamwork and a post-course survey that they could roll out in PBL classes in all disciplines. We built a toolkit on Canvas, which is our LMS, and we're in the process of building out a curriculum library that showcases the PBL happening on our campus. So I'd say at this point, it's safe to say that we've built a core of faculty who think of themselves as faculty champions of project-based learning, and in fact, that's actually the name for their Canvas website.
Oh, cool. What's the impact of those initiatives on students? What are you seeing in courses that faculty have reinvented to include more PBL in terms of the student experience?
Sure. Well, we're in early stages of getting data in terms of impact on learning outcomes and retention, but what we're seeing looks extremely positive. Anecdotally, from the student experience side, faculty can definitely feel the increased engagement. Chris did a great job describing how working on a big, messy, open-ended, authentic issue can motivate students, and we're definitely seeing that.
And that's Chris Wobie at the center?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Another key element of gold standard PBL is public performance, and that makes a difference too. So RISE, we host a celebration of teaching and learning every term. We call it Making Learning Visible. It's a large poster showcase, but it also includes oral presentations, poetry reading, and engineering demos. So it gives students doing PBL and other high-impact practices a chance to stand and deliver what they've learned with the campus community. And when you talk to those students who are standing in front of their posters or their robots or their zines, you can definitely hear their engagement. They've taken charge of their own learning, and they feel so proud of what they've done or built. And I kind of contrast that to what my students used to feel when I required a traditional end-of-term essay. They mostly felt relief to turn that thing in.
So it sounds like you think project-based learning is a particularly good fit for community colleges. Can you give us a couple reasons why?
Yeah, I do think it's a good fit. That's largely because of the versatility that I mentioned before, pretty much every discipline. Another big advantage, and Betsy mentioned this, is that PBL doesn't require a vast amount of resources. You don't need fancy labs or expensive supplies, and you don't need to fly students abroad. You can do very impactful things with the resources already available on your campus and with your existing network of community partners. And that is good because we are indeed under-resourced out here in community college land.
Yeah, what are some of the challenges that community colleges might face in implementing this work?
Sure. I'd say one of the biggest challenges is actually a fairly subtle thing. You have to understand that high-impact practices are not really a thing in the community college world. At the universities and the liberal arts colleges, it's my sense that love them or hate them, pretty much all faculty have heard quite a bit about high-impact practices. That's very definitely not the case in the community college world. And that means you need to be prepared to make the case and make it lots of times for the value of these approaches. So in the community college world, guided pathways and the completion agenda are the things. The big focus is on finding ways to increase retention and close equity gaps. It's true at BC too. Our fall-to-fall retention rate's a dozen points above the national average for community colleges, but our retention and graduation rates are about 10 points lower for our Latinx and African American students. And what that means is folks across the institution have a real sense that we can and should do better. And in fact, closing equity gaps is the focus of our work in the Achieving the Dream consortium of community colleges. Fortunately, as George Koo, Tia Brown McNair, and many others have shown, high-impact practices like PBL can close those equity gaps on your campus. But you're likely in the community college world going to need to keep reminding folks of that because they won't necessarily have heard of HIPs, right? On the other hand, this focus on a completion and equity agenda does allow things to happen maybe more quickly than they might at other types of institutions. It means that we're generally not just concerned with working with individual faculty and helping them awesomize individual courses, although we certainly do a lot of that in the Rise Learning Institute. But once we've found an approach that seems to promote student success, we're looking to scale it up almost immediately. And that's kind of an exciting place to be.
How do you scale it up? How do you scale up reinventing courses if high impact practices aren't a thing, as you say, in the community college world?
Well, that's the real question, isn't it? We don't wholly know the answer, but we're starting to realize that we don't need to have it all figured out. And that's because our faculty have tons of amazing ideas, so we can crowdsource. And that's what we're doing right now with an initiative that we're calling the Provost's Award for Innovation and Equity. This award, which we did for the first time last year, supports teams of faculty who want to bring PBL or another high-impact practice into all or most sections of a course that reaches at least 400 students. So teams apply for a chunk of funding for planning and coordination time. Not a ton, but enough for a pair of course releases and a dozen or so small stipends. And we got an outstanding array of proposals from across campus last year, which really demonstrated the interest in this approach.
So what sorts of courses are being reinvented through this approach?
All different sorts. We have faculty bringing research projects into our general chemistry sequence, and we have faculty who are bringing case competition into Business 101 and Marketing 101. We're especially excited by the work being done by a team of English faculty led by Cassie Cross and Kara Diakonov. Cassie and Kara won the Provost Award last year, and they're doing extremely impressive work revamping English 101. They're having students read all types of zines, especially the college's existing literary magazine, Belletrist. So they're bringing some of the power of the co-curricular straight into the classroom. They're having students work in teams to create their own zines. Students write a mission statement for that zine. They write to published authors and solicit contributions. They create their own content, of course. They edit it, and they share the finished zines with the campus community at the end of the quarter. Now, it's early days in this pilot, but we're over the moon about the potential. Students are super engaged, and it's not surprising. This is exactly the sort of freshman composition that I wish I'd had.
Yeah, so what's up next for project-based learning at Bellevue College?
Up next, well, when you have a crowdsourced and faculty-led approach, I'm never completely sure where we're going next. The action plan that our last team of faculty put together at the Institute at WPI last June was especially ambitious. They proposed that BC put project-based learning at the center of our work to create guided pathways, which are more structured academic pathways for our students. They recommended that we focus on reinventing our introductory math and English courses by moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach in favor of an array of different contextualized and highly project-based English and math courses for each of our 7 or 8 different pathways. And maybe some of those courses could be linked to one another or to a first-year seminar. But the team argued if we know that PBL can improve retention and close equity gaps, we should focus on getting PBL into courses that students take in their very first term. Right now, it's just a plan, but it's a very inspiring plan, and we want to make it happen.
It seems like Bellevue's really out in front on this. What advice might you have for other community colleges just beginning this kind of work?
Sure. For one thing, I think a lot of our approaches might work at many primarily undergraduate institutions and not just at community colleges. As far as advice, I'd echo some of the things that Betsy would say, which is first, look for collaborations and synergies on your own campus. Find those units already engaged in PBL and in related high impact approaches and see what you can do together. That's really important when you're under-resourced. And once you've found those areas where PBL is strong, become a cheerleader for them. We spent a lot of time facilitating faculty-to-faculty conversations to support this approach. Third, I was going to have some great piece of insightful wisdom here, but it seems to have escaped me. So instead, I'm going to close with a shameless plug to my community college brethren out there. If you're interested in learning more about what we're doing here at BC and how we got started, you should check out the Innovations Conference put together by the League for Innovation in the Community College. It's a great conference. I always walk away with a bunch of good ideas to try. And this year, it'll be in Seattle in the first week of March, co-hosted by the Seattle Colleges and by Bellevue College. We hope to see you there.
Well, thanks, Michael. I appreciate that. It's been enlightening to hear from two very different universities so far about their distinct experiences in integrating project-based learning. I'm now going to ask Chris Wobbe to come back in and help us highlight some of the best practices and takeaways for implementing this at the pedagogical level. Chris, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, that's great. So Worcester Polytechnic Institute's worked with over 135 institutions to support their initiatives. What have you learned through that work about project-based learning as a teaching method, and how has it informed your ongoing work in project-based learning?
Well, I think some of the most important things have been things that came up with both Betsy and Michael, and that is that project-based learning is this very powerful and versatile tool for learning that can fit a variety of contexts and with a variety of different objectives. And that many people can find that there are on their campuses already pockets of people doing, as Betsy called it, PBL-related work, if not out-and-out project-based learning. So start with them. They're your faculty champions. I love that Michael's group calls themselves the faculty champions because those are going to be the easiest people to work with. Check out what they're doing. Look at the results that they're getting. Use those assessments to help convince the more reluctant, because there are going to be reluctant people, and for pretty good reason. We ask faculty to think critically, and so they want to see the evidence. Starting small, as Betsy said, is a great tool for many campuses. It can seem overwhelming to think about overturning a whole curriculum or even a whole course, but finding a project that fits within a course is much easier. And that does ignite faculty creativity. And Michael's clearly harnessing all kinds of faculty creativity on his campus, which is wonderful. For administrators that want to support this, having some financial support to give those course releases and maybe stipends as faculty are doing the work of revamping parts of their courses is helpful. But vocal support, I think, is one of the vastly underrated resources available to everybody. If you've got faculty who are trying something new that has the potential to be this impactful, recognize them, call them out, congratulate them, tell them that they're being courageous, tell the people around them that these people are being courageous and what they're doing is exciting. That can be even more impactful sometimes than financial support. And then
great. Go ahead, I'm
bringing
sorry.
together those supportive faculty to form a community is really valuable too.
Great. Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Betsy and Michael, for sharing all that information and advice with us. Our audience has quite a few questions here, and I think in the remaining 6 minutes we have, we should answer as many as we can. I'll try to earmark each one of these to one of the three of you. Audience members, please type your questions into the box on your console. If you haven't already, we'll get to as many as we can. The first one here I'm going to direct to you, Chris. Do you have a suggested maximum class size for these practices?
We've seen project-based learning implemented in classes anywhere from, teens up to 120 with great effect. It will matter what kind of project you ask them to do, but I think, you can do it with some pretty large class sizes.
Have you come to any thoughts? This is just a quick follow-up from me. As to, what a good team size is, what the range is there?
Again, we've seen ranges anywhere from about 3 up to about 11.
3 to 11.
Our favorite is about 4. That gives everybody plenty of opportunity. But if you craft a project well and come up with a number of roles, 11 is possible.
Okay, great. Here's another question from an attendee. And maybe Michael Reese, you should take this one. I am a long-standing believer and practitioner of project-based learning, and I have found, to my surprise, resistance in students to do teamwork. My question, could you please give some suggestions to encourage students' engagement? You want to take that on, Mike?
Sure. That's a great question. And we do see that from time to time, particularly from superstar students who they've been knocking it out of the park with the lecture quiz method, right? And now you put them in a diverse group of other folks and say that their performance is dependent on their teammates as well. It can be a bit anxiety provoking for some students. I think it's pretty important to have some structured communication planned out with students around you doing these things. For one thing, I think it's important to make the case to students that this is highly valued in the world after graduation. Make that really lean into your gen ed outcomes and their importance there. So I like to say, show me the job you're going to get from mastering 7 chapters in the book and then knocking out the exam, right? But working as a team, that's a pretty fundamental skill, and you're going to need to work at that. Having some approaches where the students give one another feedback regularly using some class time in a structured fashion so that they have opportunities to say, well, maybe you're not doing quite enough of your share. Maybe you need to dial it back a little bit to make some space for other students and create some space for them to do that and give some feedback and correct course relatively early in the process. And telling those superstar students that they're not going to be rewarded for taking over the work of free rider students, right? That's not something that if PBL is done well that you're looking to incentivize. And all of those approaches might be some way to get a little bit of buy-in from those reluctant students. We do find that in general, a lot of students who aren't drawn to the lecture quiz approach really do benefit from this, which is one reason I think you see some of the equity gains from this approach.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's see. Let's direct this one to Betsy Berry. Betsy, what tips do you have for engaging and encouraging reluctant faculty?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, and it's one that those of us who are working with faculty on pedagogy often have, regardless of whether it's project-based learning or any other type of change in one's teaching. And I think the first suggestion I would have is to figure out why the faculty member is reluctant, and so do some fact finding a little bit, because there could be many reasons that a faculty member might be reluctant. One might be some of the things that Chris alluded to, that they're worried about not covering all the content, or they are worried the students won't learn as well, or they might be worried that students will take it out on them in evaluations, or that the students won't like it. Or they might be just reluctant because they have no idea how to do it, or they think it's too much labor, or they haven't seen the impact that it's had. And so once you have a sense of what the concern is, then of course you can address that concern in a more focused way. But I think one of the things we've found that has been so important is giving faculty examples in their discipline in particular, if you can, to show them an example of project-based learning, even ideally in the exact course that they're teaching, so that they can imagine what it might look like in their course, and also to see that the outcome of that course, that the students enjoyed it, and maybe even talking with the faculty member. So for us, having a faculty panel, for example, was a great way to share what their colleagues were already doing, and it ignited some inspiration in some of our faculty. And then finally, Chris also shared this as well. Support is important. It can be a lot of labor, and so helping faculty make sure you know that they're supported, but also really acknowledging it. So we have a teaching award. Most of our teaching awards, our Center for the Advancement of Teaching does, most of our winners are those who have done a project-based course. And so we're happy to celebrate them, put their course on our website, and I think that can be really valuable as well to motivate reluctant faculty.
Well, terrific. Thanks for taking that on. And with that question, we'll end today's webinar. I thank you all for being here. This was a very well attended and I think a very informative webinar. I thank everyone involved. Any questions that we did not have time to address will be reviewed by our presenters and responded to soon. So expect those in your mailboxes. Again, thanks to you, our audience, for attending. Please remember an archived recording of this webinar will be made available to you. And don't forget to sign up for the next webinar in this series, which will be on February 4th, 2020, and which will be called Project-Based Learning as a Vehicle for High-Impact Practices, Reinventing Programs. The URL for that, so you can register for it, is chronicle.com/PBL Webinar 2. It's up on the slide right now. Registration is now open. Thanks to everyone and have a great day.